Good day, my fellow Americans and good people of the world. Today I'd like to address you in regards to the concept of economy. To me, economy means liberty. And liberty is all about having the capacity to freely choose for yourself how you're going to show up in the world, what you're going to be about, what you're going to do. And the option that are available to you are, plenty and in abundance, and that you get to choose for yourself your own adventure game, how you want to show up every day in the world. And economy is really supposed to be about providing for that potential, and, the idea of having a economy that works for everybody so that they can live the good life is what we should be about when we're thinking of how are we going to define and delineate what economy is. It should be really about outcomes, and the outcomes should be good ones, and it should be reasonable to be able to benefit from the economy, participate and contribute to the economy, and get the sort of outcomes that you would want to have in that. And I think that the reason why we have economy is a great contrast to the necessities of governance. We need a government to keep structure in order, to be able to keep everybody in a line, in accordance, keep everybody in mutual respects, these sorts of things, and to help to make sure that people are getting along in their lives as they should. An economy is our means of being able to do provision, accommodate, steward, support, and develop and substantiate what sort of opportunities that we're going to create for ourselves. And not having a set trajectory for our economy has caused a lot of dysfunction in our economy. We have many industries that are, failing to thrive in the current economic climate because of the fact that we have far too much power and control in the government's capacity to alter and direct and force the economy to act a certain way and behave a certain way, and not having the freedom of the markets to determine, how we're going to push everything forward, which is hopefully meant to be ultimately the choices of the people to determine, how we're going to progress. We have right now a limitation of that, and so the government trying to control too much of what the economy is doing is really an infringement on our liberty. And that really goes against the founding principles of America. What I would like to suggest is that we take a new approach to economy. Again, really thinking of economy as liberty. That's what it represents, and that's really what it's there for, is to distinguish our liberty. It's kind of like an insulary protection against, the governance aspects of society. It gives us, free range and free room and ability to be creative and to take risks for higher things and to innovate in new directions and to explore and define best practices, these sorts of things. Economy is our way to have the freedom to discover and to explore and to learn and to progress in a way that isn't just about living for some the supreme leader that is representing, the follow me and I will, ultimately determine where we're going, and, everybody else just must follow sort of thing. Our economy is supposed to be about everybody's chance to make it in the world in their own way, and to make a difference in the world, and to be a part of the human experience in such a way that helps to bring us into new realms of opportunity and potentials. And so I think if we establish as a society an agreement that we should have what is a proper intended use for our economy, and that we accept our economy, the best form of economy is a free economy, free and fair open markets in a capitalistic economy that has a proper intended use to achieve welfare and stewardship, is an ideal model, because it's securing our liberties, giving us more options, helping us to make better choices, and setting us on a trajectory of outcomes that we would want to achieve. And how I would like to envision this, especially because we see, old arrangements are falling apart in terms of like our social supports and whatnot being dismantled, disintegrated, and defunded by the government that no longer sees that as a value or a necessity, no longer feels that it's important to have those sorts of social constructs and infrastructures and things. So those are all being broke down by the POTUS 47 regime. And so it is forcing us into a new reality, a new paradigm where we don't have those types of supports. But it gives us an opportunity to say, looking at the bigger picture, they weren't working as perfect as they coulda, woulda, shoulda. We didn't get a chance to improve upon them, but that's the scenario universe we live in now. We can't change what's happened, but we can do something moving forward in the future that is more positive. And I think that now that people realize what we had is gone, we can, instead of mourning what's lost, rather embrace what is to come, which is something that is far better if we intentionally build out for it. And what I'm hoping for is that we can reimagine what our social safety nets are and change them, instead of being piecemeal solutions of solving for, these societal woes of like, okay, well, that's a problem, we got to do a thing to, make sure that it doesn't get too bad, but never having enough to be able to really truly support everybody who that applies to. And then having, being pulled in so many different directions in terms of like social supports and welfare, that it's too much of a drain on our resources and our capacities, and because it takes so much to administrate these different forms of social supports. I think the better approach would be to take it kind of like a compensation package that make sure that we give security into old age, that we give youth a future that they can build on, and to secure a opportunity for participation and contribution for everyone so that they can live the good life. And that we can take the best concepts and best practices of social supports that existed, that were in the form of Social Security and Medicare and food stamps and early childhood development and childcare, and disability supports, and like medical research and things like that. All those things have now been defunded and are left in limbo, because these organizations still exist, the need for them still exists, but the funding has been cut off because of the lack of care from the current administration. So what if we created something that can replace that is more comprehensive and more integrity bound, and based off of like something that you can't defund, that you can't dismantle at a whim, that is really embedded into our society. It's embedded into our culture. It's embedded into our, our society itself, the structure of how we live our lives, our ontologies, and then also into the very fabric of our written constitution. And I believe that this is possible to create this proper intended use for our economy that gives opportunity for people to participate and contribute in a capitalistic way that is about provisioning, accommodating, stewarding, and supporting a criterion echelon of society, so everybody has what they need to be able to live the good life, so that America works for everyone, so that nobody gets disadvantaged, and so that nobody gets left behind. And in this proper intended use, we focus, instead of paying for the social support of a few people that have reached a threshold of need by some standard or whatever, rather just make it across the board that everybody in the criterion echelon of society is provisioned, accommodated, and steward with this kind of like compensation package for the fact that they in society contribute a role to society as a member of our society and a member of the civics branch of government that we establish, that says this is a direct democracy. Everybody has a seat at the table. Everybody needs to be in full participation. You're a relevant stakeholder, and you have an obligation and a duty, a right, and a responsibility to be involved in our collective governance, which involves, your personal self-governance, but also involves, participating with society and collective as a whole to achieve certain intended outcomes together that is for our mutual benefits. And then compensating people for fulfilling that role in society, which doesn't just manifest in terms of, like showing up to help to solve for, corrective mechanisms in government, but also, how you participate in the economy, like what you do in terms of productivity that renders a value for fair compensation. And that how you choose to participate and contribute, how you're involved and entangled in the economy, and then understanding what sort of like supports you need in order to be given the possibility to participate and contribute in ways with a little bit of accommodation. I think that understanding everybody has a role, everybody should be compensated for having a role, and then their involvement in that role is what renders value for the whole, and in return the whole should be rendering a fair compensation for that. And in this compensation package, we solve for needing to give old age security. We can't do Social Security because that entire system was just not sustainable as it was created. We would not be able to follow through on the promises made for that. And then, for food stamps, it's an unsustainable system to expect people to have to jump through hoops in order to, get food that they need, because, they're not asking for that support or seeking that support because of their lack of wanting to be able to, be self-sufficient. Rather, just it's an unsustainable system. It's an untenable situation for them to be able to provide that for themselves, given everything else that they have to do. And having requirements on top of that for things that they, already struggling with doing is, it's creating obstacles rather than creating opportunities. And so, and everybody needs food, and everybody needs water, and everybody needs, a safe home space, and everybody needs clothing, and we should be having systems in our economy that are providing for that proper use of stewardship that keeps people fed, safe, clothed, housed. And it's not hard to see, more than enough reasons, more than enough justifications. We don't want anybody left behind, left on the side of the road, forgotten, and, set at a disadvantage so that they can't be involved in society. There's no reason to, set people up for failure, and then set obstacle after obstacle to prevent them from ever being able to rise up and to level up their lives. And so, this compensation package is really about making sure everybody has what they need so they can self-actualize their best potential, their, best version. And to do that, they need to have, comprehensive universal health care so that when they need care for their health, they can go and they can get it and then not have to be worried with being saddled with some outrageous bill. We need to give them health assurance, which is all about good health outcomes, not about, health insurance, which is about like rigging systems that don't necessarily lead to people, don't necessarily consider what's conducive to a person's good health and well-being. Providing a universal health assurance and providing, a security for old age, a funding of one's, retirement into years where they are less and less productive over time, and eventually to the point where they are not able to be productive at all, and that they're going to need the full support of caregiving, and the capacity for them to get that care that they need so that they can live out their final days and rest and peace and dignity and love and care and support. And then, recognizing children need comprehensive child development, which includes, an education through child care and preschool and, early childhood education. It sets the precedence for success for the rest of their lives. And for education itself needs to be on an even playing field for everybody so that it acts like a universal basic innovation. Everybody gets to benefit from it in a similar way. And so we should have, a universal education system, a universal healthcare system, and a universal retirement system, and a universal support system that makes sure that people are fed, clothed, safe, and housed. And we should really have a compensation package that provides for that, and that we are doing that based off of fulfilling the roles in society that are necessary. And it's not always the roles being about, you work a job to make money. That is one role in society, but other roles include, culture and arts and, socialization and, caregiving and these sorts of things. We can't discount that because those are value generations in society. They help us to remain, within domestic order, keeps our cohesive bond, all of these things that are required for a social relationship, that we're, pathological togetherness, which is very much what a society is. It provides everything that we need in order for that togetherness to be in accords of respect and mutual interest and mutual securities and mutual benefits. And thinking about it in a sense of, if we take on, a new sense of our promoting the general welfare, one of the tenets of the Constitution, to be about promoting the general welfaring, In a general sense, we're providing the criterion echelon of society, the baseline standard. Everybody should be living this good life. That's going to look different for everybody, but it has to be a sense of we're living in abundance in a welcome situation that everyone can thrive on. And that our social safety nets are now being replaced with this assurance that everybody gets to live the good life. Nobody gets left behind. Nobody gets disadvantaged. It works for everyone. And invest in that sort of social contract with one another. This is what we're going to be about. This is what we're going to provide. And then we don't have to worry about who qualifies and who doesn't qualify. Everybody qualifies. We don't have to worry about, whether or not everybody is getting the food that they need, or the health care that they need, or the supports in their old age that they need, or the right type of education that they need. All those things are provided within our sense of this is how we have a society that's living out a way of life, that's conducive to their well-being and to the well-being of others. And we can provide that. And while the current administration may not care about figuring out how to, make America work for everyone without the disadvantage of anyone, so nobody gets left behind, so everyone lives the good life, they're in the process of trying to make things great, but in the process of making things great, they're failing to do good. And so many people are suffering unnecessarily, and it just doesn't have to be that way. So I think that if we shift our economy to have a proper intended use of welfare and stewardship, we decide that we're going to have a compensation package that is going to be about welfaring for everyone, and that everybody gets it by default. That is the criterion echelon of society. Everybody gets this. Baseline, standard, fundamental. And then we focus on investing in improving that system, finding best practices, enhancing and enriching that experience, and making sure that everybody is thriving in our relationships with one another, and then use our economy to help to fund this, to create revenue streams to be able to fund that. Replacing the need for corporations or businesses to provide for employee compensation packages that give health care and a retirement fund and many of the other perks and benefits that companies get. Instead, that is provided by just society in general. Our government structure, how we organize ourselves, has already provided that. So corporations and companies and businesses don't have to provide that for their employees. That's just a given for everyone across the board. And so now you have these ready, able-bodied people that are getting paid to fulfill roles in society, and look, you have a role in your company that needs to be fulfilled, and that person is ready to come in and fulfill that role, and you know that that person is set with the best advantages possible for them to do the best service to the world in that role. And to entice those people to choose to work for you instead of somebody else, you have to have decent and worthy work, and you have to offer them some other form of enhanced compensation, good wages or salaries, enhanced benefits packages that are more. And if you aren't having to pay that out for every single employee, you end up saving money on your bottom line, and you have more that you can spend to pay them fair compensation, fair wages. But at the very least, we know everybody has what they need to be able to get along, to live the good life. And then to fund that, it comes from what I like to call stewardship tax, which everybody pays, kind of like a membership fee, and it's based off of how much you depend on this dependable systems of stewardship, for how much you end up paying for it. So an individual only needs to steward for themselves and for their families, and so their requirements of paying into the system are limited. But a corporation needs that system to exist to support all 200 of their employees that are there, so they depend more on that system functioning, so they should pay more into the system. But that stewardship, tax is about spreading the cost of, making sure everybody's provisioned, accommodated, stewarded, and supported to live, the good life, have this compensation to fulfill these roles in society so they can do their best work, show up and do their best, be their best. If everybody has to pay into that, all corporations, all businesses, all individuals, it requires less of the immediate demand for companies that would limit them on, they only have so much of a budget. They need 200 employees, but they only have so much of a budget, having to provide all these, benefits to entice people to work there in the first place, that they can only afford to hire 100 people. So it stifles innovation, it stifles business development and growth. And especially stifles like small businesses. So this helps to create an entire pool of resources of human ingenuity and people ready to be deployed to fulfill roles in society, to work in economy, to help to, make sure society is functioning in such a way of securing a, welcome situation we can all thrive on. That's why we're doing this economy, because that gives us liberty to live life in pursuit of our happiness. So it requires less for companies. It gives those companies more, liberties to be able to pursue, advancing, their company and building it out and whatnot. And then helps them to put themselves in a position to be able to pay fair compensation to their employees. And so across the board, we would get, more fair wages that reflected the value of that people are generating in their roles. And at the same time, everybody has what they need in these basic, life vital resources in terms of healthcare and retirement funds and food, supplemental food assistance. I think of it very much like how the military has BAH and BAS, basic housing allowances and basic sustenance allowances, BAC, for basic clothing, things like that. And they have all of these ways that they're compensated for these life vital necessities, but they're receiving it because they're fulfilling a role within the military. There are, variations of like what your pay grade is based off of your rank, and, what your range of pay is depending on what type of, whatever your MOS is, but you still get this basic pay for compensating for your housing and whatnot. And I think that if we take an approach to social, welfare into social welfaring, and that it's provided for everybody, we could provision, accommodate, and steward everybody in that way, and it would help to benefit, economy, because, it takes that burden off of businesses. It will help to make sure people are ready and able-bodied workers, able to go out and fulfill those roles in society, and everybody benefits from it, and everybody's qualified, off the bat. Just being here, you are fulfilling a role in society as a part of our civics. You are, a citizen, and you're participating, contributing to society. You are part of our civics. Like, that role alone enough qualifies you for it. With the intent of, if you're an able-bodied person capable of working, be involved in the productivity of society, because we need all hands on deck so that we can be as productive as possible, because our productivity is what helps us keep our liberty so we can, enjoy the good life and, have the means for the good life to exist. Opportunities for flourishing, different types of experiences that we can have, all of that is dependent on our capacity to generate, economic activities. So I think that taking that approach is probably going to be the best way to solve for the fact that all of our old systems have been dismantled, are being defunded, and destroyed and disregarded. We can start anew with something that's much better, that solves for everything across the board in a fair, just, reasonable, right way, knowing that, you know, how people are going to draw on the system is going to be different because different people have different needs. But when we're creating a system of abundance, then we recognize not everybody wants the same thing, not everybody needs the same thing, so it's not going to be a draw on resources to drain them. We are creating more and more abundance, especially if we are recognizing we find best practices, because the proper intended use of our economy, you know, this capitalistic approach, is to find best practices to enhance our capacity to live the good life, extend that capacity to as many people as possible, and to maintain a standard criterion echelon of society that says everybody gets to live the good life. You know, I think that that's a great way to proceed forward. If we focus our compensation to be around roles rather than what your hourly pay is. There's a lot of, you know, fighting for getting fair wages and, you know, increasing minimum wage and things like that as a way to solve for, you know, the exorbitant amount of cost of living. And while I do believe that we need to have fair compensation for what people are doing, I think that a good way to make that even possible for companies to actually be able to afford to pay is to, at first, make sure we have a social welfaring standard that everybody gets these benefits in a compensation package for, and that everybody pays into to fund that program. And then companies are put in a position where they're incentivized to pay their employees, you know, fair wages, because it is in paying them fair wages that they are, you know, able to retain people that work for them, because everybody has what they need. They don't necessarily have to work for you. They could go work for anybody else because they'll still get benefits. They don't have to work for your company because your company is the only place they can get benefits from, you know, so they have healthcare benefits or something like that. And then it starts changing it so that we start respecting the people for what they do, the value that people generate, the roles that they fulfill, and the mastery of their crafts to be good at what they do so that they can fulfill that role in, you know, the best way possible. When we start treating people about you're getting paid for the value you're creating in the role that you're fulfilling, we can get away from the, you know, exploitation of people, which treats individuals like they're warm bodies filling a position and we're going to pay you hourly wage for being here for so long. You know, that doesn't work so well for companies, because people who are feeling they're not getting fair compensation are not putting forth their best work all the time. There are some people that, regardless of what they get paid, they believe in the no small task done unwell. Like, everything they do is done well, no matter how small their task is. But at the same time, they could be motivated to do more if they were paid a fair compensation. And so if we're taking it away from labor wages per the hour, and it's based off of investing in people and compensating for the roles that they fulfill and the good work they do in those roles that they fulfill, we could get into a position where people can be paid fair compensation for their work, and we'll get more productivity out of it, because people will feel valued and appreciated and supported and cared for in their roles, because society is giving them the support and care that they need, and they're valued by their companies that are going to do the extra steps of, you know, compensating them for the work that they do. And the companies have to pay you fair compensation in order for them to be able to qualify from pulling from the pool of resources of, you know, capable workers. And then making sure, like, if companies are not paying their people fair wages, then they'll have to pay more money in stewardship, because their lack of paying their people fair wages increases the dependency that those people have on drawing from the pool of resources of, you know, this compensation package that society provides for everyone. Then those people are going to need a little bit more support. So I don't think it's right that we have corporations that are essentially getting subsidies from the government in the form of not paying their employees adequate wages and fair compensation, so that those people have to live on social welfare. So the taxpayers are paying for the, difference between this company paying them fair wages that are a living wage, and the fact that these people need to eat and have money for basic essentials of life. So these corporations are getting a subsidy of government paying for the fact that they're not paying fair compensation to their people, to the point where they have to seek social welfare. And then these same corporations are funneling massive amounts of money to their, CEOs and their, executive offices and things like that, to the point where there's nothing that prevents them from funneling all the money there and then paying their people less and less, and then treating their people like they're warm bodies filling a position instead of a human being that is generating value for the company. And so there needs to be some sort of like social construct created that says, that's not okay. And that if you do those sorts of things, if how much your CEO is making in comparison to how much your everyday person is making, and they don't make a threshold of what would be considered, fair compensation for that particular role in society, then you are going to have to pay a higher amount in your stewardship tax, because the demand for provisioning, accommodating, and stewarding so everybody lives the good life is going to have a higher demand, because you aren't fairly compensating them on this end. And so I think it would be a corrective mechanism. It does very much similar concept to what we try to accomplish of breaking up monopolies in society. It's recognizing that there's ways that people can rig systems to concentrate power into the hands of a few at the cost of the many, and this actually makes it so that the concentration goes down to the smallest individual power, empowering the individual so that they get all of the benefits that they need to actualize, so that if they choose to work for a company, it's based not off of desperation of I have to work, and so I'm willing to be exploited or abused in this situation to the advantage of the CEO and shareholders, even though it costs me my life and well-being. The people can opt out of working for those sorts of people because they are secure in their situation that society provisions, accommodates, and stewards for them. And they can go seek out good and decent work from companies that are willing to pay fair compensation and wages. And for that to be a very transparent process in terms of companies would be able to be distinguished as whether or not they're paying fair compensation, not by calling them out directly and saying this person's not getting paid fair compensation by this company, but rather based off of how much stewardship tax that they have to pay. Make that very public, and it basically is a economic indicator that says this company is not meeting the basic requirements of compensating their people fairly. And that gives people an indication of like whether you would even want to go and work for that company. I think that it'll be a challenge on companies, yes, because that will exist, but it's the type of challenge that we should have in a free and fair open market in a capitalistic economy that has a proper intended use. It should be not about, generating value for shareholders and CEOs. It should be about generating value for society overall, and making sure that how we do this, economy is fair for everyone, just fair, reasonable, and right. With that, I think that if we, again, focus on compensating for roles, and we create a social compensation package for the fact that everybody that lives in America fulfills a role, and that role can be varied, and sometimes it means working a job, other times it means just being a creator or a caregiver, but everybody has a role to fulfill and, a part to play in the grand scheme of society's capacity to help to make sure everybody lives the good life. And if we adjust it in that way, I think that there's a reasonable way to generate revenues to pay for it. And the benefits would be to the fact that we would have more able-bodied, capable people to be productive in society. It would enhance people's desire to want to participate and contribute, because the more that they give, the more they're able to receive, because that capacity to compensate them can increase with our capacity to generate more economic, benefits in society. So, extending their, benefits by them participating and contributing, and then incentivize companies to be in alignment and attunement with our proper capitalism, the proper intended use of our economy, which is to achieve welfare and stewardship. And it gets everybody in a line with, a trajectory that we're set to go on together. I think that that's kind of going to be the best way to approach reorienting ourselves in our economy to make it so that it is more fair and reflective of the concept of, why we do economy is to establish liberty and to give people choices and to let people live in abundance, and to be in a thriving situation, and to not be in a state of fear of scarcity, but knowing that we will always, have a way to, live within the means of comfortable conservation, so it's not an excess, but live in such a way where nobody has to live in want, and that nobody has to suffer, and that our outcomes are really for the best interest of everybody involved. I think that once we get to a proper intended use for our economy, and for that to be welfare and stewardship, new companies are going to arise to fulfill those needs. Many other companies are going to pivot to be able to fulfill those needs. And some of them are going to cease to exist because they're useless and antiquated, but it's going to generate a lot of opportunity in our economy for new things to happen and to move us in new directions. And especially when it's based off of, like, we're all about making a thriving situation for everybody, so everybody gets to live the good life. How we can approach that is going to be varied and different, and it's going to look different because different people have different needs, different people have different wants. But it's all about doing that for everybody, instead of constantly, as the paradigm scheme is rigged right now, is to do that, but only for a few people at the tippy top, and that is unreasonable. It's unsustainable as well, because as their insatiable appetite for more and more luxury and vanity and all these other things disregards the needs of people, to the point where we're giving tax breaks to the rich at the expense of cutting social supports for everybody else. People being left by the side of the road. This is not a sustainable system, because there's going to be a point where things are tipped out of their favor, because there's going to be less people that are able-bodied, capable of working, or even willing to work to hold up the whole system that these people are wholly dependent on for their money schemes to work, for them to live their luxurious fancy lives or whatever. Like, all of that, their house of cards is going to fall down, because it's all built off of this sense of people's willingness to participate and contribute. And there's going to be a breaking point where people are just going to opt out, because, why would you participate and contribute to something that is not worth your time, that you're not getting anything out of? It's an exploitive situation. And while, especially the POTUS 47's choice of, how he's choosing to govern right now is very much about creating punitive, organizations and orientations in society, creating more prisons and finding more ways to, criminalize people. They're kind of setting up the stage that they know that, the pitchforks are coming, because they're not helping people to live better lives. But they're not interested in helping people live better lives. So instead of solving for the problem of making so people live better lives so they don't want to come after you in retaliation or rising up in rebellion or revolution, Instead, they're just rigging a system to be able to, prevent people from being able to dissent or to create concentrations of power to change the systems. This is very much along the same lines of why we declared our independence as a nation. We had Great Britain was all about making sure that we didn't have any way to find a path of recourse. We had no options but to submit to what they were doing, and it made it a very untenable situation. And people rose up in opposition to that because it wasn't just, fair, reasonable, or right. And, the current administration is very much setting that up as well. The difference being now it's going to be much harder to have that type of revolution to fight against the system because of the amount of concentrated power and capacities of the government to impose its will upon the people and prevent the people from, rising up in opposition to that. So, but the problem arising in this situation is bringing to the fold the concept of needing to accept that that's kind of like the position we're being cornered into, and that we need to solve for getting out of that position so we can be in a better position to make decisions for ourselves. We need to retain our democracy, and we need to uphold our Constitution, which is being, utterly disrespected by the current administration. We need to restore the integrities of our nation, restore the integrities of our founding documents, and bring ourselves back into a position of having a direct democracy, a democratic republic, and not that's working to the advantage of a few, but benefiting the collective. And we can do that when we establish a proper intended use for our economy, and we start electing better people for representation that are about bringing forth that type of economy that makes sure that everybody benefits, and that this isn't some type of hand up, hand out, or some impossible capitalistic chance at a big break. It's opportunity of a fair shake. It's saying, like, we all agree that this is what we're going to set and establish as the criterion echelon of society. We're going to provision, accommodate, steward for everybody. We're going to make sure that everybody is welcomed into that situation they can thrive on. We're all going to participate and contribute, and everybody is going to be able to benefit from the great opportunities that are now given to us because we have set the assurance for ourselves that nobody's getting left behind. Nobody's being put at a disadvantage. We're really making America work for 100% of the people here. We want everybody to live the good life, and that will bring many benefits. This is going to inspire people to be productive, to fulfill roles. It's not going to be, like what a universal basic income would do, which would be to people think that they don't have to do anything and they just get stuff for free. No, you have to, invest yourself into involving yourself with this to make it work as well. But out of it, you will be able to reap tremendous benefits. We are taking advantage of this great opportunity that we're co-creating together, but it's doing it in such a way that is not, it's not a system of exploitations or limitations. It's about creating opportunities and abundance, and a sense of, if we can just secure that criterion echelon and everybody's able to live a good life, we can take risks for higher things. We can discover new advancements in the realms of areas that we've never even thought we needed to have a particular type of advancement. There's so much, in potentials that are opened up to us once we've secured this basic structure. So again, I hope that we can see the value of investing in roles and to create this fair compensation package for all people in society, because everybody has a role to play, a part in the grand scheme of things, and to break down the concentrations of power by getting everybody to align and in tune with the proper intended use of why we do economy, which is, to achieve welfare and stewardship. With that, I have plenty more to say about it, but that's all for now. I appreciate your valuable time, attention, and consideration. Until next time, be well.